Hey, it's Spence from LaunchFlows.com. In this video, I want to cover some of the things that you might experience when setting up a custom product layout using LaunchFlows and the BuddyBoss theme. Now, I, for one, am a big fan of BuddyBoss and the BuddyBoss theme because I followed Michael and his partner, Tom, now and the progress, and it's really become a popular option for those who want to run their own social network. So we see this quite a bit with memberships and social networking using the BuddyBoss framework, the BuddyBoss theme. However, in order to achieve their goals, they've been very, very liberal with the amount of customizing certain things so that a user who's using their theme and their framework get the results they want. And in doing so, that means that sometimes that reaches out into the expectations about what people otherwise want to do with other WooCommerce plugins, including LaunchFlows. Here's a couple examples of things that you might experience. First of all, let's talk about the default setup of LaunchFlows for those who might be using the Add to Cart button with another language. I had a question today about my Add to Cart button is not translating properly. LaunchFlows doesn't have very many global setups, but the things that it has are on the back end under LaunchFlows. Here's a few that might run into your world if you're using BuddyBoss. First of all, you have the ability of changing the default WooCommerce checkout button globally. This could be done also on any checkout page or checkout product that is its own checkout page. But if you put in a value here, you can put it in your own language, whether it's English or another, and it says, buy it now. Instead of saying place order, it will put in whatever language you put there. That's for the checkout. Here's the one that's probably more relevant, the global add to cart button. If you are experiencing a difficulty because BuddyBoss is expecting something to show up and you're finding it's not translating properly, you can set it globally here by putting in your language for add to cart. So again, I speak a couple languages like Spanish and some European, but if you use, Google Translate, and I put it in English, add to cart, I could literally translate it into anything that I want with the native language. Obviously, you would know what you're going to put, add to cart. And so if I wanted to translate that to Dutch, I could just literally put that in, and that would be what would be on the button. Now, this can also be done in the individual product level if you're customizing each product layout. I'm just giving you global options. All right. Now, let's talk about the individual product pages themselves. Let's take a look by adding a new product. And here I'm starting out in the classic editor. I also have, you see, a couple plugins like Bertha, so that's what those are, just in case you're wondering. I'm going to switch to the block editor because I feel this gives the best experience with LaunchFlows 4.0 and beyond. Even if you're not otherwise using it for other stuff, I highly recommend using the block editor. Here we'll talk about what we're going to do with the product. So let's call this a product in BuddyBoss. It doesn't mean it's a BuddyBoss product. It's just so that we know what we're dealing with. I'm going to go ahead and publish this now. And let's talk about some of the configuration options. First of all, I'm going to put a product image in just so this will show nicely on the front end. Maybe we'll put a pizza on there. Let's just make it some values that'll show up. It's a $10 pizza. Okay. So out of the box, LaunchFlows gives you a couple options that are very useful in this situation. The number one thing I want to suggest to anybody is that you go to LaunchFlows tab under Select Product Template, and we have some default choices. Now, since the launch of version 4.0, I've demonstrated that there are really two scenarios that you're going to have. Either you're going to stick with the default WooCommerce layout for products, or you want to customize it. So for those who are using BuddyBoss, I suggest you might want to use the original template. And the difference between original and default, and I'm still working on maybe if I'm going to rename this and reorder it, is the original template takes the content area that we otherwise are making it possible to customize it, and it leaves it inside of the tabbed area of the product. So all of the things you modify, instead of showing up full width on the page, will show up inside of the tab called Discussion. And so I don't really believe this is the ideal thing to use, but with BuddyBoss, it may be the way to go. So let's do this. Let's use original template. I'm not changing the product in any way. I do have the BuddyBoss theme enabled. Let's take a look and see what we get. And here we can see the BuddyBoss theme, although I have not set anything up. It has add to cart, it has review, it has description. Let me give you an example. If I just put blah, 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 blah in as the content, you will see in this situation, it'll only show up inside of the tab for description. Here I've got reviews, here I've got description. Now, some of you might be using a different layout. Some of you might be having a layout that looks something like something else here. And in that particular case, I'm suggesting that you might want to switch to one of our other options. By the way, before I turn this off, let me just show you if we change the add to cart in the global, like we were talking about, right? So let's just go over here and go back to that option, my LaunchFlows Dutch option. If I were to save this, you'll notice that on any particular product, it will change that. So that's a good way to override that. You can also use a free plugin because every string inside of LaunchFlows is translatable. You can also use any of the PO editor. That's what they call the PO file. And one of the ones I like is Loco Translate, but there are literally a dozen. PO Edit and Translate Press. I like one called Loco Translate. And that's another one that lets you translate any of the strings. It's a free plugin, 1 million installs, 5 stars. Lets you translate any of the strings inside of LaunchFlows. So you can translate the add to cart and the titles and all the other things. Okay. Now, let's just delete this so we don't get confused because I don't speak Dutch. Let's look at what would be our next option. The blank template, the default template is essentially all the default content that you would get in the normal template, but it removes the discussion tab. It gets or the description tab. It gets rid of this tab and instead places the content below all the default content of the product. And the reason it does that is this. If we look at our LaunchFlows.com documentation and we look at how does LaunchFlows work, what we're doing with the product layout is to give you the ability to mix and match the various pieces of the product layout with maybe the checkout or to rearrange them in any way you wish. So if we go to what is LaunchFlows and we look at this one image, it'll explain most everything. Here we've got our normal product layout, and here if you use a checkout on that product, it would be below. In the middle, below the product, above the checkout, is where you can mix and match the pieces. So by switching to default template, we get this content out of that tab. And when we save it, let's refresh and see the difference. So now what we see happening is we've got the default product content at the top, the components. The reviews tab is still there, but now it's by itself. And now we've got our stuff below it. And this is super handy because even using this layout, maybe I want to move the main image or the product title. All I need to do is to go down here and let's clean this up. And let's just, for example, say I want to put the title, the product title down there. I just type product title and using the LaunchFlows special block for that, what will happen is the title will be sliced and diced out of here and put down here, which gives me the option, kind of like a puzzle. You see, I remove it from here, I put it down here. I can now relocate, mix and match whatever I want. But I can also hide stuff. So for example, let's say I really just don't need to show the reviews. Obviously, I can turn reviews off for all of WooCommerce, but maybe I just don't want to show reviews on this product. Okay, no problem. Let's do the same idea, but do it in a different way. I'm going to add a new LaunchFlows block, and I'm going to use the tabs. So I'm looking for product tabs. And when I use this, now I'm going to use the option to hide it. So I just type LF hide into the advanced option box for this block. And what happens is it is slicing out the reviews tab entirely, and it will remove it from my layout. It'll hide it. So when I refresh the page, you see now it's gone. So I can essentially move anything from this top area into the bottom area and reorganize it, redesign it. I can even use things like columns. So for example, if I were to put columns in here and just do a side by side, I can move this title into one column, right? And I can put that image. So if I type product image or product images, watch what happens. I've hidden the tab, and then I've moved the title to the left and the images to the right. So watch what happens. This is going to go down to the bottom, and the title will be the bottom, and we'll be left with just the metadata and the add to cart stuff. You see what's happened? So again, I may have to size this and relocate it and center it, but the product's here, the image is here, and now I'm left with the original stuff at the top. So this is essentially a removal option. It gives you the default stuff at the top. You can remove it, relocate it, hide it, do what you want. Let's talk about the third option, which is, I think, a useful option for a lot of people because it kind of gets exhausting if you have to, let's say, hide things that are already there. Instead, let's talk about the third option, which is a additive process. We've given you another option called blank template. Blank template puts all of the product pieces there. It just doesn't show you any of them options, any of those options. And the reason is because that way you can build from a blank canvas. Watch what happens when I refresh the page. Nothing is here. Uh-oh, what's wrong? Well, nothing's wrong. We just give you the ability to build it from scratch. So here, I'll put in the two columns, and I'll do exactly like I was talking about before. I'm going to go ahead and put in product images on the left, and here I'll put in product add to cart. Now, only these two components will show up, and obviously I haven't finalized the style or the layout, but you'll see that they appear. Now the image is here, the add to cart is here. So I can just continue by adding the other pieces. Let's add another short code here, or block, product title. And I can move that up. And you'll immediately see that I'm building now exactly the layout I want. Now here's why this is awesome. I can save this entire layout. I can literally just highlight this whole thing and say copy and move it to somewhere else. Or I can add it as a reusable block. Probably I would group it first. And then I can use this for every single product by default, simply by going to my reusable blocks and pasting it in place. We'll also have our pattern library where if you have some clever layout like this or somebody else does, you'll be able to save it there for free and so forth. So it's really, really, really simple, but I'm using the building the product model. Let's talk about the third option. Maybe it's the fourth, let's say. All right, so first of all, let's delete this. I've also included a model of something that I'm leaning in on, which is that there are many things that are hard to do even with blocks or with knowledge of CSS. It needs an expert touch to come up with something that's very dynamic. So let's say, for example, I wanted to have 100 products that all just showed up with the product featured image as the background, the title, the price, add to cart, and also the ability to have things like scroll to checkout. Here, I've given you a couple examples of these, and these are going to expand into maybe a library of a dozen things. Here, let's change the product a little bit too to make it a background that is worthy of a full screen. So I'm going to use something like this, which is a bigger image. I got this off of Pexels. What this does is it picks up the title, the price, any of the details that are important about the product, but it has a very specific custom layout that is attractive if you're going to do hundreds of these. And what I do in this case is I usually choose to change the page layout to something that is full width. So for example here, I'm in BuddyBoss, so that might limit my ability to do this natively, but I can just switch over to, using something else like the theme or the canvas or let's see if BuddyBoss actually does this. See, this is interesting. I don't actually know because I'm not using BuddyBoss theme enough if they have a layout that will be full width default. So in this case, I could just bypass it and use something else, like I happen to have the ability here. I can also use Editor Plus, which has the ability to make a full width page. And in doing so, this should make it that, that didn't work out. Let's go back here. Let's go back to theme. And I would probably have to go ahead and set up in BuddyBoss my product layout. So I would probably go into WooCommerce and I would do I don't honestly know. In the middle of the video, I don't honestly know where it sets it up, but we would have to just set up the actual default page for the products with BuddyBoss with their theme so it would be full width. But let me go back to my point because it's secondary. One of the things you'll notice is that despite the width still being containerized, it gives you the background image, picks up the title, gives you the add to cart. And why this is useful is that I typically would use this option when I'm adding a checkout to the post. So for example here, if I click add to checkout, other than the width of the page, watch what happens. It automatically gives you the ability to have the checkout below and the featured product stuff at the top. So when I add it to the cart, it's literally in the checkout and I can just immediately scroll and buy it, okay? So this is a really neat option for somebody with lots and lots of products where you don't want to style each and every one of them. And given that we'll have a bunch of options for these, it'll be a very simple thing to do. In other words, it won't be requiring you to modify a bunch of blocks or copy and paste. It'll just give you an option that works globally. Here's a slightly different style, some other ideas that we're working on. Okay, final option. Whether you're using the default or the original or even the blank, although the blanket's irrelevant. Let's say original or default. What if I want to hide that related products and the breadcrumbs and all the other junk that don't have to do with selling the product? That's where I would use the instant clean sales page. So we get the original layout, but we're going to remove the stuff that is distracting to the actual page itself. For many of you, it's not interesting to have or necessary to have related products on every product page. So let's refresh this. And now what we see is we've got our default BuddyBoss layout of the product, but you'll notice related products are gone and the breadcrumbs are gone and so forth. And that's actually quite a clever way of doing things. You could achieve the same goal by customizing it using the default template as we talked about and simply placing those things in and then hiding them. So for example, here I showed you before, you can hide, for example, the tabs and the related products. So if you did LaunchFlows tabs or product tabs, and then we click on the block and just say hide, we would achieve the same goal of hiding the tabs with related products, but we would leave the breadcrumbs in place. So here's the breadcrumbs, but the tabs are gone. If I wanted to hide or relocate the breadcrumbs, maybe to the bottom, I choose product breadcrumb. If I'm using Cadence, they have their own special one, but in this case, I'm not. So now I'm moving it down below. So if I wanted to move from here down to here, I just do that option and watch what happens. Look, there it goes. And now it's below. So those are some things that should help you out if you're using BuddyBoss in particular. I do encourage everybody to use BuddyBoss. I noticed from my video today, one of the things that I'm going to do is see whether or not I can include an option for LaunchFlows that would force or give an option for the default BuddyBoss layout, or I need to just do a little research. If you are using a theme that otherwise you don't have control over the width, we do have one global setting here, and that is this. The LaunchFlows container, you can set the maximum width of that up to a certain amount. So let's say you have a theme that we haven't seen before, or you're using a page builder, not likely, that we haven't seen before, and it just goes full width all the time. Well, this is an option to keep it closed in. You know, don't go more than 80% or don't go more than 900 pixels. Unfortunately, it's not going to do the opposite. It's not going to make it break out of the BuddyBoss container, which is clearly at play here to keep everything within a certain width. And again, that's probably an example of something that I might be able to override, but that is good for BuddyBoss, because that way they get the expected behavior that people want from using their theme with their framework. But the downside is it causes us to have to go, maybe we need to rethink a few things. Okay, so let me know if you have other questions. And I actually will be exploring BuddyBoss a little further, because their product now has advanced further in 2021 than recent years. And one of the things I want to see is whether we can make a tighter set of integrations with some of the features that make it a little less confusing for people who run into these kinds of issues. I appreciate it, and I'll see you on the next video.